next argument is going to be, well, if it was worth $500,000, why were you trying to sell it for only $50,000? See, you're wasteful. It was better off in the hands of the family that knew what to do with it, because you would have just wasted it, sold it for $50,000. I didn't know what it was worth. I was offered $50,000 in cash for it, plus they would pay off all of the lawyer's fees and all of the taxes. I accepted that because it was the only offer I had. I didn't know that I could have bumped up the price because I didn't know what it was worth. All I knew was I was about to be homeless, and these people were offering me $50,000 for something that my family flat out told me was mine. They said, we're giving this to you. Out of the goodness of our hearts, we're giving this to you. But when I asked where the deed was, they said, figure it out. They never intended for me to figure it out. If they did, then when I said, where can I get the deed for the land, the response would have been, it's in the trust, contact a lawyer. Right? They didn't tell me that. That wasn't what they said, because at this point, Kathy is still going around saying the trust was worthless. It was worthless. It had land in it worth $500,000. That is only worthless if you have a shit ton of money. And the idea that it's better off for the rest of the family that they took the money and left me homeless. Better off for who? It wasn't better for me. I spent 5 years homeless because of it, with the family lying on me, saying that I was lying, that there never was a will. Mima never loved me. She never left me any of these things. It was all lies. They had me convinced that my grandmother did not really love me because she wrote me out of the will at the last second. She only had me there so that she wouldn't be forced into a nursing home. That's what they convinced me, because of the hatred. And they even tried to make me think that I killed her. They said, well, you're the reason that she's dead, even though she had COPD since the 80s. You're the reason. Even though she was in her 80s. And, right? It's not like she was in the hospital a lot that year that she passed away. And Kathy flat out says, well, my mother walked wonderfully. I never saw her stumble. Well, that's because you were never around, because she had a heart attack in 2013 and she had to relearn how to walk entirely. She fell a lot. But only somebody who was around would be aware of that. Huh? Why wouldn't her daughters be aware that she couldn't walk? Why do you think? Kathy would bring her grandchildren over and they would chew on her walker when they were teething, but still Kathy says, well, my mother walked fine. Never needed a walker. Never needed any of that stuff. She was strong and murdered. She was old and frail and weak, and she fell and broke her hip. And no, I wasn't even in the room when it happened. I heard her fall and came out. Normally when she fell, it was in the bathroom, and I would help her up. Y'all don't know what you're talking about, but you're going to keep saying you know what you're talking about. You're going to keep talking like you know what you're talking about. Yeah, I was going to undersell that property for only $50,000 because that's what I was offered, and it would have helped me. $50,000 in Florida, I could have gotten myself a home. A real home. I mean, I could have bought someplace to live for that kind of money in Florida. You can't in California. You ain't buying shit for $50,000 in California. But in Florida, or if I had gone up to Georgia a little bit, I could have found someplace that I could have bought outright. And they'll say, well, yeah, but then how would you have lights and water and that? Why do I need it? If I've got a house, I can figure everything else out, can't I? If I've got a house that can't be taken away from me, I can figure the rest out. But I didn't have that option, did I? Because that money was better spent with my family. They knew how to spend it better. Everybody thinks they know how to spend your money better. That's the problem. And they can't prove that they spent that money better or that it was better off in their hands, because they don't know what I would have done. How could they? I never had the chance. They lied and covered everything up to take what I had, and then tried to convince everybody that I was just a greedy, selfish person wanting the inheritance, when they got mad at me when I wanted the will read, because they said that showed that I was greedy because I wanted the will read to begin with. Nobody else cared about the will being read. That's because nobody else was in it. Why would anybody else care? Everybody in the family knew that it was left to me entirely. So no, the rest of the family wasn't going to ask to read the will, and the only person left in it wanting to read the will, obviously, is just a selfish, spoiled little bitch, because the rest of the family deserves money too. How dare Meemaw leave everything to one person who the rest of the family doesn't like? We'll fix her, right? We'll fix that bullshit. Take what we want and then slander and defame her online, so she'll go through years and years of torture being called a liar for things that she told the truth about. I told the fucking truth. I have been telling the truth. I will continue telling the truth. I don't care who likes it. I don't even want the money. Y'all realize that, right? Even if I had the money to get the will read right now, everything is gone. I want a copy of that will just to prove that it exists, and to prove that my family lied, defamed, and slandered me when they claimed that it didn't. And one day I'll have the $10,000 to pay for a worthless piece of paper, because there's not anything left of that inheritance, but it will prove and justify me, and that'll be worth it. The justification and the proof that my family has been lying on me for all these years would be worth any amount of money that I have to put out to get a copy of that fucking will. And I will one day. It's not going to be anytime soon. Kathy might be 100 years old when she has to answer for this, but one day I will have enough money to force that will to be found and exposed. I have been called a liar for decades. My family has always denied what I've said. My little sister will say, well, you make everything worse. No. When you live in an abusive home, sometimes you make everything better so that it doesn't seem as bad as it is. Because I got to leave and go be with Meemaw, I was able to accurately see how shitty it was when I came back to that house. But to the other people in the house that were used to it, well, you're just making bad of it. You're just making it worse than it was. No, I'm being honest. And looking through eyes that you can't see because you were trapped in that hell for the entire stay. And I was able, just because Meemaw loved me, I was able to get out and see more of the world and see what love could actually look like. I'll never know what it feels like, but I know what it's supposed to look like. Because my grandmother tried so hard to get me out of it. Out of that hellish lifestyle that my family led. She tried and she failed. Unfortunately, I wound up worthless. I wound up on the street. But, that's where my family thinks I'm supposed to be. That's what they think she wanted. According to my family, right here on this sidewalk is exactly where my grandmother always wanted me to be. Which means that all of those years that she took care of me and promised that it was just me and her, and all of it was just lies. Lies and deceit to keep me believing, to keep me there, to take care of her. Because she knew that her family would put her in a nursing home. And she was terrified of going into a nursing home because the nursing home killed her mother. And she felt so much guilt for it because she's the one that put her mother in the nursing home, and then the nursing home killed her. And she actually loved her mother, and she accidentally killed her. So she didn't even want to think about what kind of horrors her children would put her through, because they didn't give a shit about her. So they didn't care what kind of home she was forced into. And after she had that heart attack in 2013, the doctor told her that she could no longer live alone. That he talked to me, he confirmed with me that I would be going home with her and living with her. And he told me that if there was a time when I had to move out, when I would not be living with her, I needed to contact somebody because she was no longer able to live by herself. That was a terrifying thing for my grandmother. She didn't want to be forced into a nursing home, and that's what they were going to do. So the last 2 years that we were together, under the premise that if I moved out and got my life started again, my grandmother's family would force her into a nursing home, which would probably destroy her soul. As it was, at least she got to spend most of her last days in her home with her things. Not that that matters anymore.